Me and my buddy would like to welcome you to the Halloween edition of the Rosemary Live podcast.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Rosemary Live. Today it's Halloween, and appropriately, we're going to talk about leaning into fear. This is something that's been on my mind lately. I've been trying to get out of my comfort zone, so I thought I would share a few things that I've learned along the way that I've picked up to try and help you with getting over some big fears. And, one of the main things is not being afraid of fear. Fear is not necessarily bad. Fear means you're probably about to grow. So I'd say one of the things that I've been really experimenting with lately is leaning into yes. So I've talked before in a prior episode about how I George Costanza'd in my morning and did the exact opposite of what my original plan was, and it actually worked out pretty well. This saying yes to things, leaning into things, this is a different experiment that I've been trying. So the game is don't give yourself time to think of why you might not want to do something. So that means if someone comes to you with an interesting opportunity, you just say yes and you just go for it without spending the time to step back and say, well, I'm tired, I don't feel like it, I'm hungry, I've never done it before, I don't have time, all of those things that come into your brain when someone tries to get you to do something you've never done before, and particularly with a new experience. And something happened last week that actually really got me doubling down on this. My daughter and her friend have been surfing. We're lucky enough to live near the ocean, and a lot of people surf. And it's always been in my mind that someday I would like to try surfing. And I'm sure you have this too. There are things in the back of your mind like someday I'm going to do this, or someday I'm going to move here, or try that new food. And with my new mindset, my new experimental mindset, I decided that I wasn't even going to give myself time when last Saturday they said, "Hey, do you want to come try surfing with us?" And before I heard myself saying, "Sure, let me get my bathing suit on," before I even had time to really think about it. And there I was. I did not stand up on the surfboard, but actually rode a wave in, and it was a little baby step towards maybe going farther. But the big accomplishment wasn't getting in the ocean with a surfboard. That was cool. It was definitely fun. But the big accomplishment was saying yes in that moment. And it was a Saturday morning. I could have very easily gone to the couch with my cup of coffee and said, I'd rather be comfortable. I'm so glad I went out there and I got wet and I got tumbled in the waves and almost broke my neck. And it was so exhilarating and fun. And now I've tried it, and I'll probably keep doing it too. So that's all to say that when that crazy opportunity arises, just sometimes go for it. Just don't give yourself a moment to stop. And there's actually someone I really admire, Mel Robbins with 2 B's, and I'll put a link in the show notes in the description to her site. She did a really excellent TED Talk on what she calls the 5-second rule. And where I first heard this was in relation to getting yourself out of bed in the morning. So if you're not a morning person, you can use the 5-second rule to get yourself up and out. Basically, you start counting backwards 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 when you want to do something immediately. And there's something psychological about it that happens in your brain when you're counting backwards from 5. By the time you reach 1, your brain wants to just do it. It's magical. I've tried it for getting up in the morning. So I highly recommend watching her talk. I think she's written a book. She's got other things online to check out too. So if you're having a hard time leaning into the uncomfortable thing, that's definitely a good technique. Another thing that I am trying right now, I actually just came today. I'm just a little sweaty still. I actually tried Krav Maga this morning at 10 a.m. It's a Saturday morning. And this is another thing where I have been going to a restaurant, actually a Five Guys, don't tell anyone, eating cheeseburgers. But next to the Five Guys is a Krav Maga training facility. And we always hear them doing things in there. And I thought a few months ago, I was like, wouldn't it be fun to try that? And so with my new mindset, again, you can see where we're going with this. I said, I'm going to go ahead and try this. And I told my family I was going to try it. And I told my colleagues I was going to try it. And that's another technique. So technique number 2 is tell other people you're going to do it. And then you're sort of committed. You're like, your mouth is writing a check that your butt has to cash. So this morning I put on my sweatpants and I went over there and I had the time of my life. I loved it. Krav Maga is an Israeli self-defense art, I guess you would call it. It's like a martial art, but they don't do tournaments. It's more about training yourself for self-defense. And it's what the Israeli Defense Forces use for their training. So it's pretty serious. But now, look out. These hands are registered lethal weapons, or about to be. And I loved it so much. I'm definitely going to keep doing it. So tip number 1 is count backwards from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Make yourself do it. Use the 5-second rule from Mel Robbins. Tip number 2 is tell someone out loud that you're going to do it. Make a public commitment. That's definitely a great technique for leaning into the fear. Another person I really look up to who's always experimenting and trying to get out of the comfort zone is Tim Ferriss. And, probably if you're listening to this, you have heard of him. He is basically someone who experiments on himself. Basically, his life is an experiment, and he tries anything and everything. He's accomplished so much of unexpected things. And in a rapid amount of time. So he absorbs things really quickly. Looking at some of the things he's done, the idea is to not be afraid to experiment and try a bunch of different things. So it's entirely possible I could have gone to Krav Maga this morning and decided, it's not for me, but that's okay. I could try something else. Next week, I could try judo, or I could try Thai cooking classes, or I could try parasailing or something else. And, the underlying point being that we're not guaranteed tomorrow. We're not guaranteed the next day. We're not guaranteed anything. And there are a lot of people who don't have tomorrow. They don't even have this afternoon. So when you've decided that you want to do something or try something, commit and then go try it. And then you'll know. I wanted to offer one last tip based on my own personal experience. This is an area where I have no fear, but it's a very common fear for everyone, usually. In my other life, I'm a marketer, and my secret superpower is I can walk into a room full of total strangers and be completely comfortable and walk up to random people and talk to them and have no problem with that. I know that's something that a lot of people struggle with. So I'm going to give you a few insider tips that might help you next time you encounter this fear-inducing situation. First of all, you do not ever want to walk up to 2 people who are engaged in conversation with one another. You want to look around the room. When you come into the room, look around, avoid the 2 sets of 2 people, because you don't want to interrupt a conversation that's flowing. You want to look for a group of 3 or more people, or just one person who's off by themselves. Ideally, if you have one person, that's the ideal scenario, because typically that is someone who is uncomfortable in the room and doesn't have anyone to talk to, and they're just dying for someone else to make the first move. So that's your first tip. Second tip is don't approach, if it's a person off by themselves, if they're on their phone, scrolling through their phone, avoiding eye contact, avoid those people. They're not actively looking for someone to come up to them. They're actively trying not to have someone come up to them. So take that signal. Don't be that guy. Or they may be struggling to answer emails before the session starts again if you're at a conference. So don't do that. Look for a group of 3 or more people who are having a lively conversation. And sometimes you can sense when it's not a group of 3 friends or 3 colleagues who are together. If you get some whiff that one of them is someone who's been pulled into the conversation, even better. So sometimes I will sort of hover around nearby and get a sense of what the conversation is, because you also want to avoid groups that are having some kind of really deep emotional conversation or political conversation. You want to kind of get into a lighthearted mode off the bat, so you're not plunging into unknown territory, conversation that's already in progress. Another idea when you're coming into the cold room, as I would call it, is to look for the food or drinks or snacks. That is your easiest entree. Basically, go up to the snack table, the drink table, where they put the coffee and the unripe oranges in the bowl. They always do that for some reason. I don't know why. Go up, and then someone else is bound to be standing there. And that is your ideal scenario where you can strike up a conversation, ask them if they've ever been to this conference before, how's the hotel, talk about the weather. It sounds very trite, but anything you can do to crack the ice and get some type of conversation going will usually lead to them either coming back to the table with you or sitting next to you in the next session, if it turns out that it's someone that you want to connect with or you have any connection with. So that's a really easy entree point. Also, if you're walking into one of those rooms that has giant tables of 10, it's awesome to be able to sit down at a table that's kind of half full and just do the old, is anyone sitting here? And usually that is an open invitation to introduce yourself to everyone else who's sitting at the table. So, and always keep in mind that everyone else has that same fear. They're all hoping that someone is going to crack in and introduce themselves. So if you're that person and you can muster up the guts and overcome your fear of discomfort, you're going to be doing everyone else a favor. So just keep that in mind. You're actually doing something great by approaching the group and introducing yourself. So here are your marching orders for the week, everybody. First of all, if someone asks you to do something or try something new, you have to say yes this week. You're committing to it right now. Second, if there's something that you've been dying to try but you're too afraid and you don't have anyone to commit to publicly, commit publicly in the comments and we will hold your feet to the fire. So let's do this together. We're in this together. Let's overcome those fears. Let's do it. Let's go for it. Let's slide into home plate all muddy and dirty and do this thing. And I will support you. I will be here for you. Everybody have a fantastic week.